FM News Talk 97.1.
On-demand audio.
Now, there are headlines that we have two amphibious. We have two, they're not warships, but amphibious assault ships that have apparently cleared the Suez. They're in the Mediterranean now. So much going on. Then there was the attack this morning on our military on a bus in Frankfurt. We have a huge military presence there, and of course we've been discussing this. And who better to speak to about everything going on in the Middle East right now than Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, who is infamous for his honorable service as a Marine, #1 best-selling author, and he is the host of War Stories on Fox. And Lieutenant Colonel, good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us.
Well, you've got an interesting day, Dana. There's no doubt about that. The Kearsarge, by the way, is a warship. I mean, it's an amphibious assault ship that normally would have a Marine Expeditionary Unit embarked aboard it, but apparently the administration forgot that 2 months ago they offloaded the Marines in the Persian Gulf and took them to reinforce U.S. forces in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. So when they redeployed the Kearsarge back up through the Suez Canal, they had to come back around the Persian Gulf and go back up the Red Sea, it arrives now in the Mediterranean without any Marines. So what's now happening is that several hundred U.S. Marines, I think the number is actually still classified, are on the way to link up with USS Kearsarge, which has, of course, an enormous helicopter flight deck on it. It can take V-22 aircraft, and it's got landing craft in its well deck that could, if it became necessary, to put U.S. forces ashore in Libya to rescue Americans or to help in a humanitarian disaster that is ongoing right now along the borders of Libya. It's a very interesting situation created by this administration.
It is, and I'm trying to figure out as to what it's indicating. Because the president has been he's not been very forthcoming on anything with regards to Libya, and except to kind of dance around questions from the White House press corps. Is this? And we heard about the no-fly zone, Russia knocking that down in the UN Security Council. So are we preparing to take an offensive position?
Well, it's very interesting because it was a little dicey as to whether it was going to be Russia or China that vetoed a proposal to establish a no-fly zone. I mean, the United States certainly is within its rights to do so, to protect people. I mean, we've got all kinds of latitude to do those kinds of things. Clearly, this administration wants to do things through the United Nations. They took the very bold step of sending Hillary Clinton all the way to Geneva to get Libya bounced off the UN Human Rights Commission. I mean, think about that as a bold step to support the democracy process. The problem with this administration goes all the way back to December last year when it all began in Tunisia, and the administration said absolutely nothing about standing up for human rights, standing up for freedom of assembly or expression in Tunisia until Ben Ali was on an airplane headed to his palace in Riyadh, outside of Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. When Egypt blows up in flames, the administration couldn't figure out whether Hosni Mubarak was a friend, an ally, an adversary, or someone who had to go. It was all over the landscape. We now see it in Bahrain. We've seen it in Jordan. The administration did nothing to stand up for students protesting in the streets of Tehran, did nothing to stand up for the people who were protesting the Hezbollah takeover of Lebanon. And just listening to the commentary in the committee today, where Mrs. Clinton is trying to defend what the administration has done, what the administration has done is sow chaos throughout the world. It has no firm, if you will, moral stance on any of this. We have inadequate numbers of troops, ships, airplanes, and the like to deal with it. For a few days this past week, there were more Iranian warships in the Mediterranean than there were U.S. warships.
Wow.
And we've now got to the point where the only aircraft carrier that we had in the Mediterranean is now the Enterprise battle group. By the way, the oldest U.S. carrier is now headed. It went through the Suez Canal last week, and it's now kind of stopped at the mouth of the Red Sea. I guess they're trying to figure out whether they turn it back around again, because we don't have an aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean right now.
I'm amazed at I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
Competence. It's incompetence. It's ineptness. And meanwhile, you've got everybody in the world talking about Charlie Sheen. mean, it's just nuts.
Right, completely. And you mentioned the fact that there's no consistency when it comes to foreign policy with this president. He goes and says, "Oh, I support democracy in Egypt. I support democracy in Libya." Was silent on it in terms of Iran, but yet when Honduras had their elections, and you had Zelaya, who was disposed by way of the people's vote, they went down. They were all about propping up that guy who was attempting to become a dictator. I find no consistency, and I think that they are in completely over their head, and frankly, this is not a position to where you should be learning this on the job, like in this. And I feel as though you have Gaddafi saying, well, if they establish a no-fly zone, you're declaring war on me. Is this going to be? And I know this is kind of a broad question, but a lot of the discussions around the blogosphere and some of the news is that is this sort of the start of some kind of World War III situation going on here?
Well, it could be. I'm not trying to be light about that. No, very serious.
Yeah.
This is how we stumbled into World War I with, Wilson was president at the time, and also, a wonderful college professor, but not much of a president, who promised all kinds of, we're going to reduce America's defense expenditures, and went around very much like this president, apologizing for what America had done in the past. And clearly Mr. Obama has established himself as apologetic for America and inept, incompetent, incoherent, all of those things when it comes to not just foreign policy, but national security.
Right.
If you look at the budget that he's got, we have right now today 288 vessels, warships, that are capable of being committed in the United States. And of those, over 20% are scheduled for decommissioning over the tenure of this president. Now,
wow.
I can remember when there's a fellow by the name of Ronald Reagan running against a guy by the name of Jimmy Carter, who
yes,
was the only graduate of my alma mater to make it to the White House, and was campaigning on the promise of trying to build America back to a 600-ship Navy.
Unbelievable.
If there was ever a time when we needed a Navy and a Marine Corps and a military force, it is today.
It's right now. I have one quick question for you, sir, really fast. We're up against a hard break. The attack in Frankfurt today, is there a possibility that could have been a terrorist attack? I know information's limited.
I don't think we know enough yet, but we know it was Kosovars that did it, and if they turn out to be Muslim extremists, we shouldn't be surprised.
Absolutely. Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, the website's olivernorth.com. It's an honor to have you on, sir. Thank you so much.
Keep up the great work.
Thank you. You too.